Good Friday morning, everybody. Welcome on into your FreightWaves Now Community Spotlight. I'm Kaylee Nix. We get to check in with one of the coolest communities here at FreightWaves on this Friday morning with Mary O'Connell, telling us all about running on ice. And Mary, how are you on this Friday?
Oh, I'm fabulous. You guys know there's no place I'd rather be on a Friday morning, starting the weekend off right with the coolest community in freight.
We love it. And today's episode of Running on Ice is no exception. You've got a good one with a very familiar guest. The fine folks from SeaCube have been on our episodes a couple of times now. And let's talk a little bit about the expanding reefer market.
Yeah, so we have we get to talk to Greg Tuttle today, and he's the CCO at SeaCube, and he's great. We really dive into kind of what you can expect from the reefer market, what's driving some of the demand, and then also some of the changes that are happening as a result of some of these sustainability and carbon emission programs. So we really kind of spread a pretty wide topic today.
Yeah, and I think that it's good in context of this kind of community, right? Because oftentimes when we talk about cold chain, we get very specific about some very specific topics, whether that's new technologies or trending things like packaging. And when we're talking about the market as a whole, where are we at in terms of expansion versus contraction? Are we seeing a lot of the pressures on the reefer market that we're getting on the general freight markets right now?
So it's different because we specifically focus on the containers. So typically, the things that are going via boat or ships, less of the over the road reefer rates. But basically, due to the fact that we have a very global supply chain, and there is a lot of that demand, and then also, it's something that I've kind of highlighted a few times here and there throughout, different like newsletter editions of Running on Ice. And that is, there's a whole bunch of different pharmaceutical therapies and also fruit and vegetables across the world that they have to travel by container, and less so on the pharmaceutical side, but more so on the fruit and vegetable. And there are all these restrictions and, ways to kind of prevent waste and making sure that things are staying fresher longer. And that's really kind of what is driving the demand. So right now we're kind of in that awkward, the end of kind of produce down from Latin America and South America, and it's transitioning now up to North America. But pretty much there's always goods going back and forth, and so still is very much is that demand. And as we kind of shift into hotter months in the northern half of the globe, it's something that we all kind of need to pay attention to and make sure that we're having freight move how it needs to ultimately reduce that waste, because I want to say it's like 30% of all food is lost just due to supply chain waste, and pretty much anything we can do to cut that down is going to result in better for everybody.
So the rise of globalization and globalized supply chains has, of course, come to really an immense benefit to the consumer, because you can get a lot of those specialty goods and produce specifically year round that you wouldn't be able to get unless, you had those global supply chains. But that also comes with some kinks and some really, I guess, kind of careful planning that has to go in when you're looking at moving any of those products that rely on that temperature controlled environment. Can you talk to us a little bit about how consumer preferences have maybe altered the way that we use this reefer freight and kind of move into where consumer preferences are driving the industry as a whole?
So I think the easiest way to illustrate that is going to be through grocery. So through your fresh fruits and vegetables, because it wasn't always the case that you could get strawberries or avocados or some of those more what we consider summer fruits. It wasn't always the place. It wasn't always, easy to get those in the middle of December, November, January, et cetera. You used to be limited by just whatever was growable, and, honestly, the winter was always a little bleak when it came to fruits and vegetables, because you have your apples, some of your oranges, potatoes, onions, etc. But some of those more summer seasonal fruits were always not available because just the sheer nature of growing conditions in North America in the winter. But that being said, due to the rise of a truly global supply chain, consumers have more or less kind of expected to be able to go to the grocery store in December and still pick up strawberries, blueberries, raspberries, things that are typically, known for being summer fruits. And so, that and people making switches to try to eat healthier, eat, more vegetables and everything in their diets, that has really helped drive some of this demand and drive this further globalization that is happening, throughout various different supply chains.
So with that, of course, comes a detailed look on what it takes to make that supply chain work. And then, of course, by default is a detailed look on where you can manage inefficiencies and also manage emissions on that supply chain. SeaCube is one of those companies that works really hard to make sure that they're tracking those emissions and maintaining their ESG goals. But what about the broader industry as a whole when it comes to reducing their CO2 footprint?
So a lot of it comes down to, like you said, kind of that efficiency. So part of that CO2 footprint is, reducing the amount of waste, or they're reducing the amount of products lost in transit because, maybe somebody accidentally puts some bananas next to some strawberries, and that causes the strawberries to, ripen faster and not necessarily be as good as at arrival. So stuff as simple as that. And then also there's been a huge push from a lot of the container ship companies and shippers. And, as we see a whole bunch of different climate change initiatives coming out, it's really, everyone has really kind of doubled down and leaned into that and said, okay, well, if there's anything that we can do, it's going to be worth it. Because also a lot of times, running your reefers more efficiently, reducing the amount of, only partially loaded reefers, or reducing the amount of waste that happens with food specifically that is transiting via cold chain. Reducing any of that not only is going to kind of help your bottom line, but it's also going to be a win that it's good for the environment as well, because you're not paying out claims for lost or damaged product. And if you're running your reefers more efficiently, maybe with some telematics in there, you're having less breakage, you're having less full breakdowns, which is then taking that unit completely out of service versus just hitting it with a tune-up real quick before it goes out again. So some of that preventative maintenance and other stuff like that we've seen some technologies come out for, and we've seen people kind of start to prioritize, that's going to be key moving into the future, because it's going to not only reduce emissions, but it's also going to help companies with their margins. It's going to make things a lot easier, and there's going to be a lot less downtime as a result of machine failures.
So we can finish off this community update by bringing it all back around to technology, specifically in the vein of SeaCube. We know that they are no stranger to putting out innovations, both in ideas and tech, to help get those ESG goals in line and get those inefficiencies running a little bit more efficient as well. What's next on the horizon for them? Any insight on what they're looking at developing, whether that's partnerships, tech, or even any physical technology?
I think that obviously Greg puts it much more eloquently. So to hear everything in more detail, definitely check out the episode later today at 2 p.m. But pretty much it's just going to kind of be doubling down on some of these telematics and some of these visibility tools that some of their customers are asking for, that, really kind of provides that peace of mind of, okay, I know that this is going to be at this specific temperature at this time, and it's at this location. So some of those tools, as well as, running more efficient reefer units, maybe swapping out some of because I know there's was recently like a new type of fuel that can go into reefer units. So I'm sure it's something like that will be on the horizon for them as well.
And it's going to be interesting to watch. And of course, I'm sure you will have them back on the show once again as they continue to make those improvements. You mentioned our show coming up this afternoon, but we've got the Running on Ice newsletter as well. Where can people go to subscribe to that?
You can subscribe to that on freightwaves.com/runningonIce. And then if you subscribe to it, I think for about the next week or so, there's a special promo code in there for Future of Supply Chain. If you have not got your tickets yet, there's a special promo just for Running on Ice subscribers.
Yeah, it'll save you a little bit of money, and then we'll get to see you in Atlanta, which we'll be very excited about. Mary, thank you for joining us this morning. Have a great weekend, and we'll catch up with you next week.
Thanks, guys.